Yo, so guys, welcome back to another video. This is a reaction to Meet the China You Weren't Supposed to Know About. And I saw the first 10 seconds of this video just on accident. I clicked this video and it sort of just played and I didn't stop it. And it was talking about some sort of police station or something in the Netherlands, which is interesting because this is to do with China. And I mean, I wasn't fully listening, but I just took bits here and there. So I'm basing the fact that I've seen the first 10 seconds and I'm thinking it's going to be China in control of certain things. I don't know though. We're going to see. But yeah, we're going to jump into this video. Hopefully going to enjoy. Links are in the description to my Patreon. As always, if you want to see some more of my videos, links are there. But let's jump into this and see what this video goes into.
This nondescript building in a residential area of Rotterdam, Netherlands is hiding a big secret. Or at least it was until September, when Safeguard Defenders, a human rights organization, revealed the building's true purpose. See, the building is actually a police station, but not one with ordinary Dutch police. Now, this police station was secretly run by the government of Fuzhou County, China. So what exactly is a local Chinese police station doing in the Netherlands? Well, the Chinese government's official answer is that the stations are used to help Chinese living abroad obtain driver's licenses and other government services. But Safeguard Defenders report reveals something much more complex and sinister. After diving into publicly available documents from Chinese provincial and local governments, government announcements and press conferences, the organization revealed at least 54 separate police stations. According to the documents analyzed by the organization, overseas police stations
54 around the... Wait, what? Why do they need police stations? I know they're going to go into it, but before he talks about it, police stations in other countries, what the hell? And I think the US was lit up, which is a surprise because I thought the US would be aware to anything China is doing, as anyone is. But I guess we're going to see where else they are in the world.
Stations are used to track Chinese citizens committing fraud in foreign countries. In fact, the Chinese government has identified 9 fraud-related countries and is now forbidding its citizens from visiting them. These include Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, the Philippines, Thailand, Turkey, and the UAE. In these forbidden countries, these overseas police stations are being used to ensure any Chinese already living in these countries return to China immediately. But the first crack in this official explanation is that the network of overseas police stations goes far beyond these 9 countries. They are actually present in at least 30 different countries. But the thing is, even if you're a country, you can't just set up a police station outside of your own borders. Even setting up a building like an embassy or a new consulate requires approval from the host country's government. So how is this even possible? Well, before I answer that, I quickly want to thank the sponsor of this video, Masterworks.
Getting his bread. You'll love to see it, man. Alright. Links are in the description, you know, that kind of stuff, but wait, when's it over? Yeah,
how is this possible? I mean, in Canada, their offerings by clicking the link in the description. Alright, so how is this possible? I mean, in Canada, for example, a foreign government has to send an official request to the Canadian government with a detailed justification of the need before opening a new embassy or even hiring new diplomatic staff. And according to international law, opening a new building like a consulate or even a new job position at an embassy can happen only with the consent of the receiving state. So this doesn't add up. See, a core principle of international law is the idea of sovereignty, which essentially means that countries respect each other's borders and don't interfere with what happens in foreign territory. So when it was revealed that China was secretly operating police stations in countries like the Netherlands, Germany, and Ireland, these countries' respective governments were understandably pretty pissed that their sovereignty was being undermined. The Dutch and Canadian governments have called the police stations illegal, and 14 countries are now investigating the situation. The Irish government has already ordered the stations to be closed. But the thing is, China has never really been 100% behind the idea of sovereignty anyway. For centuries, China's relationship with neighboring countries was not one of equals, but a hierarchy with China's emperor at the top of everything under heaven. Now that China is once again a powerful country on a global level, it can impose its will on smaller countries. We can see this with the way it has built military bases in the South China Sea, or even in important new Chinese laws which apply not only to China's borders or to its own citizens, but to the entire world. This is also the case for the national security law passed in 2020 to quash the protests in Hong Kong. While the overseas police stations are the creation of individual Chinese provinces and not China's national government, they reflect the national government's apparent desire for extraterritoriality or control beyond its borders, especially when it comes to Chinese citizens. And while the official documents focus on fraud prevention, there's a pretty good reason why that isn't enough to explain the true reason behind the secret police stations. See, when a criminal escapes one country and goes to another, if the two countries have an extradition agreement, the criminal can be sent back to their home country for trial. And according to China's state-owned newspaper, The Global Times, China has extradition treaties with 59 countries. But generally speaking, the offense must be considered a crime in both countries for the extradition to be approved. Not to mention, a suspect in a European country would have the right to a fair trial to prove their innocence before being extradited to China. And the reason that's a problem is that Chinese citizens who speak out against their government aren't breaking any laws in Western countries, which is where these hidden police stations abroad come into play. The officers
To try and, I guess it's to try and give a, well, I can't think of what I'm trying to say. It's to try and give the people who can talk about China in these different countries, I guess, the fear of they can be sentenced even though they're not breaking laws in the country they're in. There's these police stations and stuff that can, I guess, enforce it in some sort of way.
Stations abroad can put pressure on Chinese dissidents to try and convince them to return home. And they have a few main tactics to make this happen. The first way is to intimidate, threaten, or even imprison their family in China to convince the dissidents to give in to their demands. If that isn't enough, they can send agents to threaten or harass the dissident in person. Finally, while the tactic hasn't been used in overseas police stations, other overseas crime-stopping operations have included kidnapping Chinese citizens abroad to return them to China against their will. So why is China so obsessed with controlling its citizens even when they're not even on its own territory? Well, since 1949, the Chinese Communist Party has had a complete monopoly on political control of the country. That means that unlike the US's two-party system or Europe's multi-party democracies, China is a one-party state, and anyone who questions the Communist Party's rule or its legitimacy is therefore a threat to the system. The Chinese government strictly controls the internet, requiring domestic websites to censor users and blocking access to foreign news and social media with what has been dubbed the Great Firewall. This gives the government a monopoly on information and means that while nearly 1 billion Chinese citizens are online, their only experience is unrecognizable to most of us outside China. Instead of Google, they use Baidu. Instead of Twitter, they have Weibo. But there's one app that is hard to...
But the thing is, they use these, that the Chinese citizens use these, like the Chinese versions of the apps, but then footballers who go to China, because there's a lot of money in Chinese football, just because they want good players to go there and they'll give them insane amounts of money, they can still use these sites that we use in, like, well, the rest of the world uses, like Twitter and YouTube and Google and all this sort of stuff. So it's so strange to me that they don't allow the people from the country, born in the country or just citizens of the country, to use these websites. But then people who move there, I guess if you've got a high-paying job or you've got a big stature or just whatever you are, you're just well-known, you're famous, whatever it is, or you're a footballer, you're an athlete, and you come from another country, you can use these websites. It's so weird to me.
To compare to anything popular in other parts of the world. WeChat. On the surface, it seems like a messaging app similar to WhatsApp, but in China, WeChat is practically a necessity for daily life. Walk out of your home and you can pay for the bus or unlock a rideshare bike with a WeChat mini app. Feeling hungry? Even a tiny food stall probably has a QR code for WeChat Pay, since over 100 million small businesses in China use QR code payments. And if you want to catch up on the news, you can do that on WeChat too. In fact, WeChat may even have a misinformation problem worse than Facebook, except anything overly critical of the government is quickly censored. With such a convenient app, it's no surprise that WeChat is a lifeline for Chinese living abroad to stay in touch with their families, especially the nearly 700,000 Chinese students studying abroad every year. But there's a dark side to this cleverly convenient app. Since the app has to comply with Chinese law, it can be used by the Chinese government to track the activities of its citizens abroad and who exactly they're talking to. But even without government surveillance, the app has been a powerful tool used by Chinese student groups to organize against what they perceive as anti-Chinese interests. At one Canadian university, a group of Chinese students contacted the Chinese embassy to warn about an upcoming talk at the university, who is part of the Uyghur minority. The students were reportedly told to record the event to see who attended and to learn who organized the event. But even without direct government involvement, many Chinese students take it upon themselves to police the speech of other Chinese students who say anything critical about their government.
That is insane. That is actually wild, man. Imagine how you're one of those students that you're grasping on these people, and you know this what's going to happen to these people, or to their families, or whatever. They're going to have the worst of the worst things happening to them. Because of what? Why? Why are you being like that? You're so they're worse than teachers' pets. Like, you got those students that are just teachers' pets, or they'll just be good at everything, and then they'll be answering all the questions, and the teacher will be loving them, and they'll be blah blah blah, and just all this sort of stuff. And these are worse than them, man. I mean, then in the grand scheme of things, they're not actually bad. They're just people just like being smart, pretty much. There's nothing actually wrong with that. But in school, you hate it. These people, oh my days, I cannot even compare. But they are just why? Why do you need to do that? You flipping, you stink, mate.
Or its policies. According to a Human Rights Watch report, many Chinese students studying on campuses in liberal democracies like Australia, Canada, and the United States have to censor themselves to avoid being reported to their government. Those who have spoken publicly on sensitive issues like
poor people that actually want to talk out are being censored by other people who are trying to protect the same thing. Like, why?
Taiwan, Tibet, or Tiananmen Square reported getting menacing calls from government agents or even calls from family begging them to stop. But China is far from the world's only dictatorship. So why does it go to such lengths to keep tabs on its citizens abroad? Well, it might not surprise you at this point to learn it's because of history. See, China was ruled by emperors for over 2,000 years. But in 1911, the long line of emperors dating back to literally the same time period as ancient Rome suddenly came to an end. And this was partly thanks to a man named Sun Yat-sen, who formed alliances with major figures in overseas Chinese communities to support and bankroll attempts to start a revolution in China. After the successful 1911 revolution, Sun Yat-sen became the first president of the Republic of China, and therefore the first non-emperor to rule over the country. The example of Sun Yat-sen shows the worst nightmare of the Communist Party: Chinese communities abroad organizing against it and raising money to finance its downfall. So now that we understand this context, the role of the overseas police stations start to make a lot more sense. As most dissidents haven't broken any local laws, they can't be extradited and foreign police stations can't be involved. For Chinese living abroad who oppose their government, the stations are a tool to exert control over them. To give an example of what this looks like in practice, take the example of Wang Jingyu, a Chinese dissident living in asylum in the Netherlands. Wang told the magazine Der Spiegel that he was harassed with calls from a number associated with an overseas police station. The man who called him reportedly tried convincing him to return to China, and after he refused, Wang was framed for a bomb threat. While the tactic of fabricating crimes seems limited to Wang's experience, China has plenty of other methods to convince people to return, like threatening their families. In fact, over the past year or so, over 230,000 Chinese have been persuaded to return by their government. But in any case, after all the bad press they've caused, it seems like the overseas police stations won't be sticking around for much longer, at least in Western countries. So we'll have to see what new tactics the Chinese government takes to maintain control over even the most defiant of its citizens. But that's it for this video. Thanks for watching.
Absolute insanity. They don't just try and control everything their people do inside the country. Whenever they leave, they're still trying to control them as if they're living in China. It is mental, man. There's 13 Chinese police stations in South Africa alone. What? And that figure is from 2018, so it must be even more now. Why? That is wild. How is this even possible to set up under the noses of all the governments? I live in Sweden, and just hearing about another country having a police station scares the hell out of me. Funny how these stations were ordinary terraced houses in my country. Let me just search. Chinese police station, England. Where would it be in England? 2 in London, 1 in Hendon, 1 in Croydon. So they set up 3. Madness, man. Imagine someone done that in China. I can't imagine the uproar from the Chinese government and stuff. Madness. But yeah, this is something to learn about, and this blew my mind, to be honest. I know there's a lot of sort of not dark, but just weird things that this country and this government do. But this is one of the strangest topics I've seen. Police stations in other countries, it's just wild. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this video, and until next time, like, subscribe, and peace.